I saw it. Yes, actually saw it in action. It was swirling up from the floor and hovering with a baffled, shrinking and convoluted squirm before the open window where the candle flame strained away from it. I saw something else too. It began to take shape. For a dizzying second, I had a glimpse of a dim, revoltingly squat head, punctured with two oval patches of an incredibly pure lapis lazuli, a perverted apology for eyes. Shape ended here, and the sickly, greyish-brown mist trailed and then looped itself over the vague travesty of a head, which vanished as the whole mass disintegrated, to the accompaniment of a deep thumping in midair. The phenomenon kept me standing there, numbed with a peculiar wonder. In that instant, fear left me, and I was jolted by a feeling of heightened consciousness that approached elation. I had the sensation of being witness to something cosmic. But there was no time for reflection. The thing had materialized again. I saw it after its violent disintegration, wreathing itself into being once more near the dressing table. It began to move in my direction, wriggling and humping itself in its usual grotesque fashion. It was another horrible moment in the story of my bones and my flute. Something landed with a rattling clack at my feet, and I looked down and saw a box of matches. I heard Mr. Nevinson shouting, "Scratch a match and see if it won't help to keep it off." Without stopping to ponder on how effective such an experiment might be, I bent and snatched up the box. The thing had just begun to circle round me when I struck a match. A brown wall of mist leapt before my gaze, and I staggered back. The room thundered. I heard a muffled whistling sound, and then a lisp, and the box of matches was slapped from my hand. When I recovered, I saw the shadow mist swirling near the washstand. The box of matches lay on the rug before the wardrobe. I dashed across and picked it up, and then I heard the voices of Rayburn and Mr. Nevinson calling confusedly at me. I was too dazed to make out what they were trying to tell me, but suddenly there was a clatter on the floor, and I saw what they had done. It was one of the tin plates which had been tacked to the windowsill. The soap piece of waste lay a few inches beside it. Mr. Nevinson said, "Light it, Milton. Try that. I don't believe they can put that out." I rushed forward and with trembling hands fumbled the waste into the plate. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the shadow mass approaching me. I struck a match and threw it into the plate, backing away quickly. Whatever it was that flung me across the room, I never knew. There was a drumming surge of sound in my ears, a shock of movement, and the whole perspective of the room seemed to go awry. I came up with a bump against the wardrobe. The voices of my host and Rayburn, I now realized, had been joined by those of Jessie and her mother. I heard them exclaiming, glanced at the bed, and saw Mrs. Nevinson sitting up, staring around in astonishment and terror. At the window with her father, Jessie was gazing in at me, her lips slightly apart. But this was not all. Through the cottage there was a high shriek sounding, as though someone was blowing fiercely in a flute. Just one note, alarmed and urgent, that quivered in the night air. Of the shadow horror I could see no sign, but the candles of the easterly window, the window I had guarded earlier that night, were out. The waste in the plate, which I had lit, still flared brilliantly in the middle of the room near a crumpled rug. The flame gave an added unrealness to the scene. Mrs. Nevinson's face had a sculptured fixity, and the faces of the others at the window seemed like wax masks, especially Mr. Nevinson's and Rayburn's, which were shiny with perspiration. All traces of that awful stench had vanished too. But the sustained shriek did not cease. I heard Mrs. Nevinson murmur, "It's the flute." She was very pale. From the expressions on the faces of Jessie and her father, I knew that they too were hearing it, and also Rayburn, for I saw him turn and begin to look slowly and puzzledly about him. Then something new happened. Around us, eerie and incorporeal, there broke out a babble of sounds. Lost, wild voices, the voices of crazed creatures of air and space, it seemed, set up a stammering throughout the cottage. In the room here, and then on the veranda, then seemingly in the sitting room, back here in the room with us. Abruptly, everything stopped, though the silence that came down was not one of peace and relief. The air had a strange tissue tautness, a thin rigidity and an oppressiveness, a kind of occult waiting. When Jessie sighed and said, "You think it's all over now, Milton?" you could detect the tentative note in her voice, indicative of the conviction that she had merely said what she had to reinforce her courage. Her mother murmured, "I don't think it is, and you know it isn't." There was such fear and despair in Mrs. Nevenson's voice that the rest of us looked at her. "What do you mean, Mother?" Jessie asked. "Didn't you have a nightmare too? Don't you know what has happened?" Jessie shook her head. "No, I didn't dream anything. Daddy says Milton brought me out here and put me into the hammock. Daddy and Rayburn say nothing happened to me. When Milton lit the waste in there, the shadow thing rushed through the window and went out into the night. It put out the candles, but it didn't enter me as on the other nights. Isn't that what you said, Daddy?" Her father nodded. "Well, I don't know," said Mrs. Nevinson. "But whatever experiments were carried out while I was asleep have precipitated a crisis. I've had the most terrible dreams I've ever had." She pressed her hands to her face and began to sob nervously. When she had succeeded in controlling herself, she said, "It happened as if it was real. It wasn't like a dream. I actually felt I was dragged along through the jungle towards the spot where the bones of this Dutchman are buried, and his flute. I knew it was the spot. I saw him. I knew it was he. He whimpered and besought me, in Dutch, to help him. I couldn't understand a word, but I knew what it was that he wanted to convey. He pointed to the spot where he wanted me to dig, and wailed, and my God, I don't know how to believe all this is happening." "Wait, go on," I urged her. "What happened next? Was he alone when he told you this? At least, when he whimpered and behaved as you say he did? Give us the details, it's important." "No, he wasn't alone." She clicked her tongue and added, "If you treat me like a child, Milton, I won't tell you anything. Why should I want to keep back the details?" I began to apologize hurriedly to appease her, but she interrupted me and said, "As long as I live, I don't think I could ever forget it. The thing that was with him, my God, I never dreamt such evil beings could really exist. Yes, I know I dreamt it, but I know it really exists. This wasn't an ordinary dream. It happened to me, to my astral body or whatever you call it. I really went through that jungle tonight. The spirit part of me." Mr. Nevinson and Jessie came into the room, and in the tenseness, in the urgency that possessed us, Rayburn thought nothing of clambering over the sill too and joining the rest of us as we gathered round his mistress. Mrs. Nevinson continued, "It was horrible, a horrible slouching thing that was with him. It was daytime, but the foliage overhead threw everything into a kind of twilight, though I could still make out the thing clearly. It had grey, wettish limbs like flippers, and then there was a kind of fur in its body, and it had a squashed-in head with two spaces like eye sockets. They looked blue, very blue. And while the knave woman kept pleading and whimpering and beseeching me to help him dig up the bones and things, this horrible creature squirmed and staggered about. It seemed afraid of something in the air around it. It made queer scratching noises or scraping noises, and it thumped about, and at one moment I saw something flicker like fire near it, and it seemed to break apart in slimy rags. But it came together again, and then after a while there was a big white flash, and it snarled and sprang at me. I smelt that foul, musky smell, and I heard it rasp out something at me. It was the same voice I used to hear in my other dreams. It used English words, and it said distinctly,
7 more hours, and he and you will join us forever.
And then it gave a kind of slubbering squeak, and I felt it press something against my hip, something clammy and hard. I couldn't see what it was, but I knew it was a flute. It branded me as that woman up the river was branded. I asked her, "Have you looked to see if... She interrupted me and said, "Yes, I've looked. See for yourself." Without a thought to modesty, she drew up her nightgown and exposed the back part of her right thigh. And we saw it. Bluish, 10 inches or so in length. Jessie gasped. "Yes, that was it. The same thing we saw in Matilda." Her mother said, "I believe we're doomed." Her voice was a little cracked and wild. "You have it too. Every one of you. You too, Rayburn. Examine yourselves and you'll see. This is what the marvelous experiments have resulted in. Oh, my God. Oh, my God." One by one, we examined our right thighs, and one by one we discovered that wheel. Against the deep chocolate of Rayburn's skin, it looked black and ineffably ominous. A satanic mark that made us each stare about us, conscious again of the watching stillness of the atmosphere. It was a moment of real crisis in the story of My Bones and My Flute.